Hi, and welcome to College Questions. My name's Nick. If you haven't been to my channel before, I'm an independent educational consultant and founder of Dawes Academics Consulting, and it's my job to help students and families understand the complex process that is applying to college so that hopefully it's a little bit less overwhelming and stressful for everyone involved. On my channel, you can find out about all the different facets of the college application process, but this week and for the next few weeks, I wanted to make sure that we talked about standardized testing. And today I specifically wanted to answer the question, do you need an SAT or ACT score to even get into college? Before we talk about that, though, I wanted to clarify the three different policies that colleges can implement regarding standardized testing in their admissions policies. The first of these three policies is referred to, as test required. This is the policy that would have existed for most colleges prior to COVID-19. You would need an SAT or ACT score in order to apply to most colleges in the United States. There are some colleges that have reverted to a test required policy since 2022. They've determined that having a standardized test score is beneficial for their ability to understand and predict success at their particular colleges. MIT, most notably, was one of the first colleges to step out and say that they wanted SAT and ACT scores back on their application requirements page. Purdue University shortly followed them, but there are a few other universities that you might not be aware of as having test-required policies. Some of the other notable ones include Gallaudet, Georgetown, and Georgia Tech. In the blog post in the description below, you can find out some of the other colleges and state university systems that are also requiring the SAT and ACT, but I think those five are the most notable. The next policy that you'll see at a lot of schools is the exact opposite of test required, and that's test blind. A test blind college does not want to see your SAT or ACT scores at all, whether or not you took the test. Some of the notable examples of these are the University of California, Caltech, Pitzer, Reed in Oregon, and the Washington State University system. Schools like these aren't going to ask you for, nor do they expect, your standardized test scores. And I have heard of some students trying to sneak their test scores into like an additional information comment box or something like that. And I would really discourage you from trying to do that. If a school has decided to be test blind, they want to make a decision and they're taking a position on the usefulness of standardized testing, and it's not going to help them determine whether or not you get in. But also, if you give them that information when they're not wanting it explicitly, you're also kind of disregarding their expectations and wishes and not following their directions, which isn't going to help you. For the California State Universities and the UCs specifically, the UCs are barred by a settlement in a lawsuit. The University of California, or Regents of the University of California v. Smith, they are legally barred from using SAT scores. So if you send them your scores in your additional information, that could bias the reader, or they have to go and pick it out of your application before your application gets sent to a reader. It just causes a lot of problems. So if a school is test blind, don't even try to sneak your score in, even if you have like a 1600 or a 35 or a 36 on the ACT. It's just not worth it. All other schools, however, are going to fall into this test optional bucket. Test optional allows you to decide whether or not you're going to submit your SAT or ACT score. I will say, however, that some colleges are struggling, and there are news articles out there talking about this. Colleges are struggling to compare students with scores to students without scores. And in general, the test score is just one of many factors within your application, and giving colleges that additional data point can be helpful. Colleges will go out of their way to say, however, that you are not disadvantaged for not submitting a score. So if for some reason you don't have a score or you don't want to submit your score, they're not going to hold that against you. Colleges are looking for reasons to admit students, not reasons to disqualify students. So not including a score isn't going to make them scratch their head and wonder. There might be many reasons that you wouldn't take the SAT or ACT, or why you wouldn't submit a score. But if you do choose to submit a score, it can provide some additional context or demonstrate academic ability that's not reflected elsewhere in your application. So, does that mean that you shouldn't take the SAT if you're not applying to a test-required school like Georgetown or MIT or Purdue? Not necessarily. There are several other ways that colleges can use the SAT and ACT that don't involve admissions that would still make it beneficial for you to take the SAT or ACT. Did I say SAT and ACT? I think so. There are two specific ways that I wanted to highlight that colleges use these standardized tests that might still help you even if you choose not to use the test for admissions. The first of these two ways is in course placements. When you get to a college, let's say you don't take AP Calculus A, B, or BC, or let's say you take it and you get a 2 or a 3, and at your college you need a 4 or a 5 in order to get credit for those classes. You're going to have to take some math classes for your general education. And not only are you going to have to take some math classes, but you're probably going to need to take a placement test in order to figure out which math class you are equipped to perform well in. The same is true for English, or especially for writing courses. They will have placement tests that will help them determine which level of English or which level of writing to put you in. Some universities, including test-blind universities like the University of California, will use these standardized test scores, the SAT and ACT, in lieu of making you take placement tests. So you could sign up for a math placement test and a writing or English placement test at the college where you're going to go, or you submit your SAT scores or ACT scores, and they will use those scores to help determine which classes you belong in. So in this way, it could save you additional testing down the road, in addition to potentially helping your standard or your admissions policies and profile when you go to apply to colleges. The other way that standardized tests get used by colleges is in what we call merit scholarships or merit aid. Merit scholarships are scholarships given by the university to students in order to attract them to enrolling in their college. You don't have to pay this money back, and often whatever merit money a college offers you is renewable every year, assuming that you get a certain GPA. So in this way, you could get $15,000, $20,000 offered to you to take that amount off of your tuition, and you never have to pay that money back. Some colleges will expect you to have an SAT score or an ACT score in order to even qualify for that money. This was especially true in 2020 and 2021. COVID made colleges very aware that maybe they shouldn't require the SAT or ACT for admissions, but they weren't necessarily thinking about their merit scholarships when they made those decisions. So students would get into the college without submitting a test score, but then they might not qualify for merit aid or scholarship money from the university because the scholarships required the SAT or ACT scores. Some colleges have rectified that since 2021, and so now even their merit scholarships do not require an SAT or ACT score. But there might be scholarships that do require an SAT or ACT score, or there might be colleges where they say, no, we still want to see that in order to determine how much money we're going to make you eligible for. So in those two ways, taking the SAT or taking the ACT can still benefit you, even if you don't apply to any test-required colleges. So 2 things I always recommend students do as a result of these policies is, number 1, anytime you get face-to-face with an admissions officer or a college representative, whether you're on a campus visit, at a college fair, or if a college rep comes to your high school and gives a presentation, there are 2 sets of questions that you should ask them. One about course placements and a couple questions about merit scholarships. For course placements, of course, you should simply ask, can I use my SAT or ACT score to substitute for course placement tests when I arrive at your college if I need to take placement tests. And they might tell you you don't need placement tests. Or they might say, yes, you can substitute a standardized test score in lieu of taking another placement test. Or they might say no. The other questions you want to ask are regarding merit scholarships specifically. You want to ask, do I need merit, or do I need an SAT or ACT score in order to qualify for merit scholarships at your college? And you want to also ask, are there any scholarships at your college that require an SAT or ACT score? And the reason for this is that you might not need an SAT score in order to qualify for merit money, but there might be some scholarships at the college that do require it, that you could qualify for if you had an SAT or ACT score. So in theory, if you apply to a college that doesn't require an SAT for merit money, maybe they'll offer you $15,000. But perhaps there's another scholarship for an additional $5,000 that you could qualify for if you had an SAT score. And so you want to know that, because that's $5,000 that's renewable every year, assuming you do well academically at the college, that you're going to lose out on. And, a $55 test that you take on a Saturday versus $5,000 renewable every year, the math should be pretty easy on that. So I really encourage students to ask those questions whenever they get to meet with an admissions officer or a college rep. The other question you can ask has to do with test optional admissions. This is asking about the percentage of students who apply without providing a standardized test score, and then asking about the percentage of students who are admitted without providing a standardized test score. You want both of those percentages because you can then compare how many students are applying without a score versus how many students are being admitted without a score. And you can use this to determine how successful is the college at evaluating students who don't have scores as a ratio of how many kids applied without them, how many of those got in. Because some schools might give additional weight to applicants who have test scores. Another college might not care. Another college might try to make sure that the proportion of students who apply without scores is the same as the proportion of students who get in without scores. Each college is going to have a different policy based on their own priorities and values. And so if you can find that out, that can help you determine the likelihood of getting in for yourself with your profile, with and or without a test score. And that might be a determiner as to whether or not you even apply to a college in the first place. So I definitely recommend students ask these questions whenever they have a chance to talk to a college representative. So in the end, do you need a standardized test score? No. However, I still encourage all of my students to take the SAT or the ACT at least once. My view of it is that it's better to have the test and not need it than to need the test and not have it. If you don't know what colleges you want to apply to by the end of junior year, and then you find out that there's a college that would offer you merit scholarships, but they require an SAT score, or you decide, you know what, I didn't think I wanted to do CS, but I really think I do now. I've changed my mind, and so I wanted to apply to Purdue as a reach school. Well, Purdue's going to require the SAT. And so suddenly you're in a position, it's the end of junior year, maybe it's June, and you've missed the June SAT. You now have just a few more testing opportunities in order to get the score that you need, either for merit scholarships or to apply to a test required school. So that's going to create a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on you as a student or on your whole family, trying to get you ready for that test and get you a testing date, and then taking the test and making sure you perform well because you only have a few opportunities to take it before you have to apply. And that's on top of taking your classes, doing well in those, filling out your applications, and writing your essays. It's a lot to take on all at once. So I really recommend students plan for the SAT and ACT, still take it, still attempt it, because it's better to have that score and then to apply test optional and not even use it, and then maybe use it down the line for placements or to qualify for merit scholarships or other types of scholarships than to not have it and then be set scrambling at the last minute. Next week, we will talk a little bit about the differences between the SAT and the ACT. And I have some other videos planned about the digital SAT that's coming next spring and when or you should submit your SAT or ACT scores to colleges for those of you who are thinking about applying test optional. I hope you found this video helpful. If you want to learn more, you can go to my blog in the description below or visit my website. You can also email me any questions you have at collegequestions@dawesacademics.com. That's DAWES academics.com. And I look forward to hearing from you, and keep an eye out for my video next week.